by the 1% not only of people in an institution like this, but 1% in terms of the values which are perpetuated through the media, through issues like exhibitions like this, in which the Manson Medal, the average size of a house in the Manson Medal is over 200 square metres. So that's just one example of how we're perpetuating a set of values which are of the 1%, which dominate architecture culture and architecture education. And I think we actually need to say much more, as the occupiers very strongly and poignantly do, that we are the 99%. And I have to disagree with Helen about the thing about diversity and about being putting off fees, and I have to agree with Robert that there is a very serious issue coming down the way, that in privatising education, the government is playing simply into the hands of the elite on the one hand, the academic elite, and the financial elite on the other hand. And I think Robert's call for more flexibility, for getting rid of the idea of time and going to the idea of accumulation of learning, to actually acknowledge multiple routes through the profession and not the 1, 2, 3 are incredibly important if we can reach a more diverse way forward. And I, of course, agree with Alastair that architecture needs to be defined in much more broad ways than simply the definition of the building. And I think the RIBA needs to move much. I mean, I'm not saying it's all going to collapse, there will be still students in architecture, but we need to get rid of a 120-year-old system of validation, of value systems, and call ourselves 99%.
Thank you. Helen, maybe you'd like to respond to that in terms of, I thought it was interesting that Nic said that had he not had a grant, he wouldn't have been able to go to university, but you think your assessment of the new debt system is that you think that graduates are going to get a better deal?
Actually, yeah, the facts and the 30-year cap, and actually that I had to pay my student loan back above £15,000, and that's getting raised to 21. I think. But isn't it because actually architects won't have to pay it back because they will actually never earn over a certain amount? That's based on the average. Well, I think it's a 30-year cap as well. They've said if you haven't paid it off within 30 years, then the debt is wiped.
But I don't think as well that that's going to necessarily affect people coming from like lower socioeconomic backgrounds who are afraid of these levels of debt.
The question is, I was committed to architecture, and my mum and dad couldn't pay for me, and I was the first year of I had to pay loans. I never remember thinking, oh, I won't do that because I've got to pay that back over the rest of my career. I think there's quite a lot of scaremongering with the £9,000 fees. People almost see that they need to make that commitment, that financial commitment, before they go. This is paid back over their entire career or over those 30 years. When you're living in a system where 50% of people are then promoted to go to university, when I first started university over 10 years ago, it definitely, I think it was about 20-something%. So something has to happen. And I think that this is a reality. It is going to happen. And I still don't think it would have put me off from a career in it. I think there needs to be a lot more discussion about the actual system and the implementation of that system and its impact onto architecture, because it is a 5-year course. It isn't just a BA Honours when I've got over £30,000 worth of debt. It's something that to me is interesting, because I have to actually study for 5 years and not 3 years, and that's mandatory in the accredited system. That's an issue. And I think actually employers at the moment, I mean myself and the other people I've been speaking to after running the trial of Studio, these are incredibly difficult times, and to get employers to commit to taking on people for work experience or just actually making a financial commitment to something, I don't know if that's going to be realistic. I think what is realistic is saying to them, if you are employing a graduate and they are doing fee-paying work, then guarantee minimum wage. Please eradicate unpaid internships for people that are doing fee-paid work. That then will have a knock-on onto how people are formulating their fee proposals, and so that undercutting. When I first started university over 10 years ago, it definitely, I think it was about 20-something%. So something has to happen. And I think that this is a reality. It is going to happen. And I still don't think it would have put me off from a career in it. I think there needs to be a lot more discussion about the actual system and the implementation of that system and its impact onto architecture, because it is a 5-year course. It isn't just a BA Honours. I mean, I've got over £30,000 worth of debt. It's something that to me is interesting, because I have to actually study for 5 years and not 3 years, and that's mandatory in the accredited system. That's an issue. And I think actually employers at the moment, I mean, myself and the other people I've been speaking to after running the trial of Studio, these are incredibly, incredibly difficult times. And to get employers to commit to taking on people for work experience or just actually making a financial commitment to something, I don't know if that's incredibly realistic. I think what is realistic is saying to them, if you are employing a graduate and they are doing fee-paying work, then guarantee minimum wage. Please eradicate unpaid internships for people that are doing fee-paid work. That then will have a knock-on onto how people are formulating their fee proposals, and so that undercutting, hopefully which I would do myself, but that undercutting, that culture of undercutting, we have to protect our own fee rates in the absence of RIBA fee scales. So I think there's lots of issues, and I think actually saying that there has to be new apprenticeships between the universities and the employers is a burden on the employers that at the moment I'm not sure they're in a position to take.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's actually nicely leading on to, basically the aim of tonight is hopefully to together come to some points of agreement that we can all move forward on. And through discussion we've decided that it would be useful if there was something that students could take away and agree to act on, and practices, we could suggest that practices act on a certain point, and then a point of action for RIBA and one for academia. So if you'd like to help us together to come to these points, it would be really great, and possibly we could use some of the suggestions that have already come from the panel. Yeah, and I think that Paul's going to help us by maybe starting to do a list of some suggestions. And I'd like to open the questions to the floor. So, Wayne, have you got the roving mic? Oh, Alison's got the roving mic. Okay. Yeah. So, maybe Merlin might like to respond to some panel.
I think it's turned on. Nic, it's interesting that you're saying that architecture doesn't need to be taught in buildings anymore, but isn't that easy for you to say that to run a course to do with visual arts and moving images more than the built form as a tangible object?
I don't understand the question, because I teach architecture on a Part 2 validated course. Yeah. I teach buildings, I teach detailing, I use audio-visual or animation and motion graphics as a way of describing that. Because I would say one of the other problems with architecture and why it's such a sort of specialised little niche is because the types of representation that it's used are largely anachronistic and also impossible to read by the majority of members, not only of the population, but also by a lot of members of the kind of architectural professional building industry. You know, when I used to work on site, and you bring in a new set of drawings, the sort of builders used to laugh and say, oh, you got more of those comics for us. And I think actually addressing the way in which we make architecture, so that we don't... Today, we had a meeting, and someone was bemoaning the fact that we only had 100 drawing boards in the drawing studio. And I was thinking, what is this the kind of École des Beaux-Arts? Is this a sort of 19th century view of what architecture is? If you want, you can make an architectural drawing on your phone. Why do we need? We have to question all of these assumptions. Actually, the majority of what a kind of practicing architect does is they write letters, they write specifications. They're writing letters to make sure they don't get sued. They're writing consents. Actual design is a very small part of that. I think we need to look at the whole programme. I would actually start one thing: architecture is not the architectural profession. I think that's the most important thing that I'd like to sort of contribute to tonight's proceeding.
I think that's really interesting, because the beginning of your point was about the fact that students come out with all sorts of skills, and I think maybe something that we've been finding through